Hello and welcome to Plant CEO. In today's episode, I'd like to welcome my guest, Andrew Ive, founder and general partner of Big Ideas Ventures. Welcome, Andrew.
Hello there, Nat. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you doing?
Very well. Yeah. This lockdown period we're in is somewhat challenging, but at least we're all getting a little bit more family time than we anticipated.
Yeah, it's great to have that, and I think we'll probably miss it as soon as we've come out. Don't know when that will be. More likely now, probably next year, probably by the look of things. Unless you live in New Zealand, obviously. I think all the other countries have got some catch up to do.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I think this has given us an opportunity to consider what normal we go back to. What parts are we going to keep of what we've been going through the last few months? I.e., for example, I know friends of mine have been doing extra sport, have been working out more regularly, even though it's at home. More family time, more dinners around the dinner table, eating food as a family. All these things, maybe we can try and keep those as we go back to normal.
Yeah, exactly. I think also my next door neighbor actually said maybe every year we need to have a week of a lockdown to let the planet also breathe for a while.
Wow, that's a super good idea. That's actually a really fabulous idea.
I was actually going to tell him to put it up on Change and actually make that into a petition. I think it's a great idea.
Well, there's that company Green Monday who basically suggests that every Monday we don't eat meat just for that one day. And obviously we can do that for as many days as we want. But maybe there's that Green Monday idea where one day a week or one week a year or something, we just give the planet a bit of a break.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I would love to see that happen, actually. Actually, David, who's going to be coming on the show soon, actually. So yeah, we'll be talking to him about that. It'll be great to start actually on your background in marketing. So obviously I'm in marketing in terms of my profession, and you started your career, I think it was at P&G on the cosmetic side. It'd be great to learn more about that and what your experience was there.
Sure. So I did an internship between the last year of college and graduating at Proctor and Gamble. I chose that organization because it had a fabulous reputation for brand management, world-class leadership in brand management, in marketing. And I thought it would be a really great place to learn that kind of that part of my career. I'd actually started a company when I was in college as an undergrad, and I realized there were certain things that I needed to learn. and so when Procter offered me an internship, I accepted, really enjoyed the experience, and joined the company when I graduated. I thought working at Procter for 3 or 4 years would teach me a lot of the things that would become really useful to me, and that's exactly what happened. Yeah, I joined cosmetics and fragrances. At the time, it was an entirely new division for Procter. They were known for sort of doing laundry and cleaning, health and beauty. They had a kind of 100-year heritage in some of those other categories, and yet they, for whatever reason, decided to branch out and acquire businesses in cosmetics and fragrances. So entirely new category for them. They considered it pretty much the Wild West for themselves, and they gave me that choice of either working in a very traditional brand where it was half a percentage point shifts in a year would be cause for excitement, or an entirely new category, the Wild West, where they were still trying to figure out everything. And given my personality, I jumped at the chance of the Wild West and doing something that was unbroken ground in that sense.
Yeah, so I think having worked with Coty myself in the past, and when they're working with I guess the luxury brands who have their own sort of guidelines over what the brand guidelines should be in terms of advertising, there's a sort of a battle between the license holder and actually what messages you can and can't put out there. Did you face sort of similar challenges when you were at P&G, or was it brands that they had actually acquired, or was it more of a license model as well?
Yeah, so the brands that I worked on, so CoverGirl Cosmetics was one, Old Spice was another. They were brands they owned.
Okay.
They did have a license at the time with Hugo Boss,
Right.
and Hugo Boss obviously had their own fashion line and so on. So that would have been a license situation, but I didn't work on that brand, so it never really came up. Now there was the brand in the US, CoverGirl, was and may still be, I don't know, the #1 brand from a volume value perspective, and therefore, because we were launching it in Europe, we were sort of dictated to by the US brand in terms of how we leverage the assets and the kind of positioning of the brand and the price point and those sorts of things. So we had certain kind of tracks that we needed to follow, so that we didn't diverge too much from what was happening with our US brand.
Yeah. So I think the whole space now is really quite interesting, especially as you're finding health and beauty brands who are going sort of direct to consumer. They're creating these pre-packaged boxes. They're also really pushing the cruelty-free and the vegan angle in terms of the ingredients that they're using. And that's a huge market right now. Even, talking to my daughters who are interested in this brand, oh, you should go and speak to this CEO. You should go and speak to that CEO of all these brands. I think they just want the makeup.
Yeah.
The whole space is just really quite cool.
So so one of my kind of side projects when I was there was to discontinue a brand, and that brand was called Outdoor Girl. It was a local cosmetics line that had been launched in the UK and Ireland sometime before, and it never really taken off. It really didn't do very well, and they wanted me to basically discontinue it, which translated means getting a bunch of people to go in on the weekends and the evenings and put the products in black plastic bags and disappear them, get rid of the products. Now, because it was called Outdoor Girl, I thought there was maybe an opportunity there, especially given what was happening with Body Shop. So, to your point, you're talking about cruelty-free, natural, kind of more sort of, natural ingredients. Body Shop, 20 years ago was sort of the leading edge of exactly that, right? Animal free, animal cruelty free, natural products, and so on. And so Body Shop
actually was a big one for them as well, wasn't it? Reusing the bottles.
Yeah, absolutely. So Body Shop was sort of the beginning of that kind of movement in the health and beauty space, and what's happening now is pretty much a kind of coming back a lot of those themes.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like how brands are also dealing with COVID, like Lush saying, if you need to come in and wash your hands, come into our stores, and obviously then you have the experience of using their soaps. I think that's quite interesting, like a play on that to entice them. Obviously now I think they're probably shut. This was prior to most of the lockdown happening with the retail stores. But yeah, super interesting. We could talk about that for ages. But then after that, you decided to move to a food tech accelerator. Can you tell me about your experience you had with them? I think it was FoodX that you worked for.
Yeah. So there was quite a distance between Procter and Gamble and FoodX, but yeah, happy to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, there's probably about 15 years gap between.
Okay.
I wish I was that young. No, so yeah, I took over responsibility for FoodX when it was very young. The founder decided he wanted to go in a new direction, and I pretty much took over in the first, I would say, 12 months or so, and I think it was about 12 months, maybe 18 months after the launch. And so I took over as MD, and we being the team, we built FoodX, and that was very much focusing on food tech startups, young companies globally, and working on, helping them to launch their products, grow their products, get funding, pull the pieces together for these young food companies.
So what sort of innovation did you see happening in the food space at the time?
Yeah, so I mean, FoodX was basically the first food tech accelerator globally, and we got it to the point where approximately 800 to 1,000 companies were applying on an annual basis. So the gamut of innovation was seen. We were seeing companies in the supply chain. We were seeing plant-based. We started to see cell-based apps, sustainability, upcycling, you name it. From a food perspective, we were having companies from around the world applying with all sorts of different business models. Interestingly, there were certain trends that we saw coming through, and often they were following successes. So, for example, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, we had a whole swath of companies coming through on the insect side. For about a year, quite a few companies were promoting or moving forward with some form of execution around insects. But that sort of came and went quite quickly. I'm sure there are companies. Well, I know there are companies still in that space and using insects, for example, as a feed for animals, etc. But from my point of view, what I really started to see coming through in a big way was plant-based and cell-based as a significant opportunity. And the reason why we saw that not just as a kind of a new thing, but actually a shift in consumption was because the consumers were behind it. It wasn't a kind of startup-driven phenomenon. It wasn't something that just sort of popped up from entrepreneurs. This is something that was very much consumer-driven, and from a Procter and Gamble perspective, what you're looking for first and foremost is where are the consumers going, and Procter uses a lot of data to understand those kinds of consumer insights before it launches new products, new brand extensions, and so on. From a FoodX perspective, I was seeing consumers moving in that direction. I was seeing it in retail stores. I was seeing it in grocery stores. Obviously, we were starting to see the success of companies like Impossible, like Beyond. We were seeing a whole range of new brands coming through and getting moving from being a kind of obscure peripheral brand to being something that was kind of central aisle, or in a kind of core positions in store, which was showing me that not only was it an innovative product, but that consumers were gravitating towards it and were integrating it into their daily lives. I also was aware that plant-based foods and cell-based foods not only were where the consumer was going, but also had a far lower potential footprint in terms of climate change, CO2. Often these products have the ability to be healthier from a personal perspective, less fat, less cholesterol, etc. So whether it's from a climate perspective, a personal health perspective, or even, for example, an animal welfare, perspective, those foods, plant-based and cell-based, had the potential to not only deliver what consumers were looking for, but to do so with a far lower impact.
Yeah. And so when we previously spoke, I think when you turned 50, you decided you had 10 years left of good working life. And that's when you decided to create your own VC fund and Accelerator. So can you tell me about, obviously you saw the trend happening, and you probably would have recognized which markets that were happening, but you decided to really zone in on the plant-based and the cellular side. Can you tell me a bit about your journey to start that, the Big Ideas Ventures?
Yeah, sure. So I've been fortunate enough to work across maybe 6 or 7 industries in my career. finance, health and beauty, technology, software, and food, and so on. And often I would walk out of my office or my building or wherever I was, doing my day job, and I would sort of wonder to myself whether my job and what I'd done that day was in some way beneficial. So, for example, when I was working in cosmetics at Procter and Gamble, I used to walk out thinking to myself, do women truly need another shade of lipstick? Do they really need another eyeshadow? There's thousands of eyeshadows, there's thousands of lipsticks, there's multiple brands. Am I really making, any real difference? Am I doing anything that's worthwhile? Now, when you're younger, and you're, when you start a family and you've got mortgages and you've got school fees and all sorts of other things to worry about, you don't often, it's quite easy to get tied up in kind of having a salary that just sort of covers what you need from a family perspective. You don't really start maybe you do, maybe you don't, but I wasn't, when I grew up, thinking about, is what I'm doing benefiting the planet? Is what I'm doing benefiting, humanity in any way? Now, it wasn't until I was, as you mentioned, coming up to 50, that I sort of thought to myself, okay, I've got a decade left. When I'm 60, assuming my wife's still talking to me, huge assumption. Assuming she's still talking to me and still wants to hang out with me, she's probably going to want to spend, 60 on spending a lot more time with me. At least that's the plan, the current plan.
Yeah.
What that means is I've got a decade to leave a mark. I've got a decade to sort of take all of the lessons I've learned, all of the stupid mistakes I've made, and ideally translate all of that into doing as much as I can to have as big an impact as I can. So, as I was sort of approaching my 50th year, I was sort of thinking, okay, is it really about making as much money as possible? Is it really about being able to, I don't know, buy something new, buy some kind of man toy or whatever it is that people do with their cash, or is it about something else? And I came to the conclusion that I wanted the next 10 years to be to make things better, and the driver for that was my daughter very much. She's starting as she moves to adulthood, and she's going to college now in September for the first time. She's inheriting a planet that we and my generation have had possession of for the last 30-40 years, and I ideally want her to inherit the planet as an adult that is in a better shape than when I took hold of it and when my generation took hold of it. Unfortunately, I don't think right now that's the case. I don't think that my daughter's generation are in a better place than we were. We've got at least 2-degree change in the temperature. At this point, we're on track for 2-degree, 3-degree changes in global temperatures. The possible consequences to rising water levels and changing weather patterns, crop availability and the ability to grow enough food for a burgeoning population. All of these things make me nervous, and I know they make a lot of people nervous. And if I can, over the next 10 years, work with great entrepreneurs, engineers, scientists to bring some of the solutions to the world that will help solve some of these problems, or at least make a dent in some way, then the next 10 years will be well spent. And that's what it's all about for me. Now, interestingly, I think by and by the way, I'm not a pessimist. I'm not a kind of person who's going to kind of doom and gloom my way through life over the next 10 years. I truly believe that human beings are, especially when the going gets tough, incredibly creative, incredibly, smart and able to come up with solutions. And I do think that when the going gets tough, we're going to have entrepreneurs, scientists, engineers, and others who are able to find solutions. And so, yes, my role, if there is one, and if I can have one over the next 10 years, is to find those great entrepreneurs, scientists, engineers, and to help move some of the obstacles out of their way so that they can be as successful as possible with, delivering these solutions to our species. And I'll happily work with anyone and everyone to make sure that those folks, those entrepreneurs, engineers, scientists, are as successful as possible, because we all need it. I mean, we've talked about flattening the curve of COVID. The biggest curve that needs to be flattened is climate change, and COVID is very scary, and it's caused a dramatic loss of life that is terrible for everyone concerned, and has impacted a lot of people. But we're talking about a species changing event with climate change right now, and it's potentially going to impact the millions. And again, I'm a positive person, and I do believe that we have the potential to find the solutions to some of these problems in the short to medium term.
Yeah, I mean, it's very commendable of you to do this. I think it's also one of the reasons that I've also started a show. Hello, who's that?
This is Coconut, and if I don't kind of pick him up occasionally, he kind of bites my ankles and starts barking. So it was either pick him up or
yeah, I think it was whining before, right? That's a good name. I think it was whining before, was he?
Scratching at the door. So basically, when the door's closed, he comes up and scratches and says, basically, let me in. And if I ignore him, he barks until I do. So
yeah, I was just saying, nice to meet you, Coconut. So yeah, I think I think it's very commendable of you, and I think that's one of the reasons that I've also started this show, is also to highlight some of these companies, and it's really a numbers game for me. Like, the more and more companies that we have, the better impact that we can have on the climate. And I think it's for us, coming from a marketing angle, it's good to give them exposure. Good to give you exposure, so you can also talk about the companies that you've invested in.
Now, the interesting thing is, I don't think that doing the right thing and supporting the companies that are sort of at the cutting edge of what's happening in the plant-based food space or cell-based food space means that it's just about doing the right thing for the planet. Yes, it's first and foremost, but I think it's possible for investors to invest in these companies and make a pretty healthy return. So it's not a
choice versus a financial choice for the investor.
Yeah, exactly right. So for example, if you're an investor who's just about making money, I think, and I think we've seen, for example, with Impossible and Beyond and so on, that it's possible to make significant returns in the plant-based and cell-based space. I think that's been proven now. But I also think that it's possible to not only make money, but also do the right thing and bring foods to market which resonate with where people want to be from a consumption perspective. So, we are culturally influenced by our families, by our where we're brought up, what we like to eat and so on is very driven by our, those cultures, those habits. Food is such a central part of everything we do. It's how we share time with our families, COVID notwithstanding. So food is very central. But I think it's possible to, again, make money and bring great tasting, amazing foods to market that just have a far lower impact on climate and, sustainability.
Yeah. So it'd be great to know a little bit more about the companies in your portfolio that you're backing, actually.
Sure. What do you want to start with? Some kind of plant-based meat or plant-based, what's...
Let's start with the plant-based meat alternatives, and then we can move on to the cellular ones.
Yeah, so I mean, so we focus with our first fund, the New Protein Fund, on plant-based meat, seafood, and dairy. So we don't just cover meats; we cover a range of things. For example, there's a company in our portfolio in New York called PlantKind, and PlantKind is focused on plant-based mayonnaises and salad dressing. So not egg-based, but it's actually leveraging kind of plant-based ingredients. We've got a company called Grounded that we invested in from Australia, who relocated to Los Angeles, and Grounded is leveraging cauliflower to make plant-based cheeses.
Yeah.
So they've got an incredible range of cheese products that taste like Gouda, Camembert, feta cheese, and they're made from plant-based ingredients. A lot of the cheeses in this category in plant-based often use cashew nuts.
That's right.
I would say 80% of the companies we've seen use cashew nuts.
Yeah.
These guys are fermenting using a typical cheese process, cauliflower, which is just kind of mind-blowing, and it's ugly cauliflower too, cauliflower that would generally be thrown away because it doesn't look pretty on the shelf.
Oh, right.
We've got a company called Patch Organics. Patch Organics is using pumpkin seed to create a really delicious, healthy plant-based milk product.
Okay. Yeah.
So one of the things that we see often in plant-based milks is almonds. As being one of the kind of core ingredients often, and almonds are an allergen. They're also very heavy in terms of water consumption. They're not the most environmentally kind of sensitive,
product
ingredient. Shall I keep going?
Yeah, definitely. It's great.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, I know that almond milk, for example, is quite very popular in the US compared to, like, in the UK. I would say more people are probably drinking more oat milk. I would imagine.
Yeah, so oat milk has kind of popped up in the last year or two in the US as well. A couple of things. One is it tends to be high in sugar and high in fat. It can be, depending on how it's processed. Also, it can be gluten. There can be a kind of gluten aspect to that for people who are gluten insensitive, for example.
Sure.
So a few more companies for you. Revolution Gelato. Revolution Gelato is a plant-based ice cream range, and that product wins awards versus dairy. They've probably got 10 awards in ice cream tasting competitions. It's so an incredibly... Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, what's their base that they use? So some of the alternatives may use coconut, some may not, etc. I interviewed a company called Perfect World Ice Creams, based here in the UK, actually. So yeah, I'm interested to see what they're doing different.
Yeah, I'll get him to come talk to you and take you through how he creates his magic. I don't want to spoil his thunder.
No worries.
There's a company called Please Food, and that's Pleese Foods. And these guys, they've got a really interesting product. Cheese, regular cheese, dairy-based cheese, performs in a certain way. Yeah. So for example, if you put dairy mozzarella on a pizza,
right,
a pizza oven is at 500, 600, sometimes higher temperatures. If you put plant-based cheese on a pizza in a pizza oven, it disappears. It basically vaporizes
because it's normally coconut based, and it just definitely.
It just disappears, right?
Yeah.
Also, cheese slices on burgers, they have a certain temperature by which they melt on top of the burger, right? So plant-based cheese slices, Daiya and others, they basically just sit there like a piece of plastic on top of a burger.
Yeah.
They're not at the right temperature to melt over it. So Please Foods have created mozzarella for pizza that works in extremely high temperatures. It tastes like mozzarella, it looks like mozzarella, but it's plant-based, and it works and doesn't disappear in pizza ovens. And pizza's a big deal, obviously, around the world. Also, they do cheese slices that melts at a burger temperature.
Yeah.
And at a plant-based burger temperature, so that it kind of does what it's supposed to do on top of the burger.
Have they looked at the protein elements of like casein to get that consistency quite right, which is, you know, one of the core things within cheese, to sort of crack, I would say.
Yeah. So the Please Food cheese product is based on a bean.
Okay.
So that's that, and they've spent probably, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years, 3 years, some obscene amount of time making sure that this product does what it's supposed to do, as well as taste how it's supposed to taste.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to win people over, isn't it? Like as soon as this taste barrier has been lifted, and people like the taste, and then it's, you know, the cost, if it's lower cost than the traditional forms, then you're going to see more of a rise coming. And I think especially for not just the plant-based people, the vegan people, but also, you know, people who have been eating meat and dairy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great product. Please Foods is doing really well. I expect, for example, for this product to be in, you know, the Taco Bells of the world at some point in the future. Not only will they be on pizza, but I think they'll be on, you know, in the QSR category, because it's just a really great tasting, you know, plant-based product. Yeah. I'm just gonna cover off a few more while I have you.
Yes.
One is a company called Uproot, so UPROOT. These guys are just passionate, super passionate about getting plant-based milks and all of their varieties out to consumers. Their go-to-market approach started out, and they're sort of trying to figure out if, given COVID, it still is going to be their main go-to-market strategy. But they wanted to get dispensing machines into universities. So one of the things they were seeing at universities was that if plant-based milk was available, it was often a carton that was sort of underneath the counter that people asked for. And what they wanted to do was to create this kind of machine with multiple, you know, types of plant-based milk: soy, oat, chocolate pea, and coconut milk. And people can just go up and, you know, you put their cup against the kind of little metal tab and just sort of
it directly in a chilled way, I guess.
Correct. Exactly right.
Yeah.
And they will get these into, and already have got these into, universities focused on students. We're finding, for example, that students are dramatically moving towards plant-based milks versus regular dairy.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, universities in the US right now are closed for the summer, but they're also sort of figuring out how do they reopen given COVID. Some universities have said they won't until next year. A lot of universities said they probably will. So, you know, these guys, Uproot, are sort of figuring out what's our perfect go-to-market strategy. Do we need to pivot, for example, towards grocery or some other channel, or do they stay with the, you know, machines focused on universities and maybe, for example, hotels? It really depends on what's happening with the lockdown in terms of that go-to-market strategy.
I think that's good. I mean, in general, I think it's a great strategy, because that's the core audience that you want to also believe in your products. And by having easy access, kind of like, you know, when you had the Coca-Cola vending machines, it's all about that access, isn't it? Immediate access to find it wherever you want. So yeah, giving that and giving them a good alternative to have now is great.
Yeah, and also their products taste great. So, for example, we've got one in the office.
Yeah,
I somehow persuaded them to put a machine in our
yeah,
office in
brilliant.
New York.
Yeah.
So I'm always running out and sort of filling up with a kind of chocolate milk pea chocolate milk product. It's quite delicious.
Yeah, great. I might need to see if we can get one of those machines for company I'm working with, Undertone. They're in New York, so yeah, it'd be great to see if we could do that for our kitchen.
Yeah, absolutely. Shall I go
yes,
more? Or
yeah,
sure.
I think it'll be great to talk about. Yeah, go ahead. I think it'll be good to talk about the cellular based ones, and also get your opinion on where that market is going. I think, when you look at it at a local level, people's opinions differ, like whether they want to have like a GM product that's lab grown with scientists sort of being concerned about what will happen in a few years after they eat it. That's the whole sort of preconceptions of that, and
Sure.
great to get your thoughts around the companies that you're working in, how you're addressing the marketing side. Actually, would be quite interesting to talk about.
Sure. So cell-based, I would say a year ago for us was sort of it was going to be a tiny percentage of the portfolio. So our approach was, cell-based may or may not have a market at the end of the process. So, people could spend hundreds of millions of dollars getting to the point where you can manufacture cell-based meat at a similar price point to regular meat. So that's the goal, right? To get cell-based to the point where the cost of manufacturing it is at a similar price, similar cost to regular meat. Well, that's an incredibly tough target to hit because the traditional meat industry is produced at such scale.
Yes.
Producing cell-based at a similar cost of goods is going to be very, very tough. And also, once you do that, you've got to ask yourself the question, are people going to be prepared to walk into a grocery store and consume products that include or are purely cell-based meat?
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, I think in the last 6 months, consumers are starting to kind of question whether or not the traditional animal protein supply chain is robust, and whether or not the supply chain is as pathogen free as we originally thought. So I think, in the next 10 years, providing the cost of goods gets down to a manageable level, people may see cell-based as a cleaner way of producing the meat that they want to consume versus the factory farmed approach to, meat production. Now, there's a gamble there, especially as an investor. Are we going to invest X number of $100 million over the next 5 to 10 years to arrive at a point where we can produce cell-based meat inexpensively? And the second part of the equation is, will people consume it? Yeah. Will people be prepared to consume it? There was an argument that part of what has happened with COVID occurred because of a pathogen that was introduced into the meat system. I don't know if that's accurate. I don't know if that has been proven or not. I know there was a lot of news and articles written about some form of wet market in some place or other that could be the kind of source of what's happened with COVID. If something like this happens again, and some people believe it could and may, and if the meat industry, even if it's a peripheral aspect of the meat industry, was the source, I think that will further erode people's confidence in consuming meat farmed in a traditional way. At which point, people will either A, stop consuming meat, or B, look for a cleaner process of providing that meat. And I think cell-based could be that cleaner, solution.
And really, I think at that time, they would have to have complete trust in that. And I think when you look at what Beyond Meat did when in their early sort of investigations, when they were surveying their potential consumers, was that the general public was saying no to sort of genetically modified foods and no to soya and no, so they took that all on board when they developed their product with that in mind. And it'll be interesting to see if those opinions start to shift.
Yeah. The kind of GMO argument, I don't know. I think people are sort of, and this isn't going to be popular of me to say, but I think people are selective about what they consider to be GMO and what they don't. So, for example, chickens were never designed to grow the way they're currently grown. Chickens are probably, I think they're something like 40 or 50% the size.
Larger, yeah.
Of what they were historically, and we've grown chickens we've modified, for want of a better word, chickens to kind of be a certain way because we want to consume them.
Yeah.
That's just one example, but pretty much anything. And we've been splicing together different breeds of roses and other fruit, other flowers, fruits, vegetables for hundreds of years. We've been modifying, for want of a better word, fruits, vegetables, other things, seeds, for hundreds of years. So this kind of genetically modified was just sort of a bandwagon and a drum that people were beating. I don't know if you can beat a bandwagon, but I'm kind of mixing my metaphors here. But it became a sort of drum for people to beat to speak about bad food versus good food. And I don't think it's as clear cut or as simple as that. And a further consideration is, as we get closer to 9 billion, 10 billion people on the planet, I'm not sure we're necessarily going to have the discretion of whether everything is, organic, locally sourced and not genetically modified in some way.
Yeah. So thinking about your current portfolio, is there any sort of companies that you're missing that you would like to see come up, whether they make it now for this year or even for next year? What would you like to see? What sort of companies would you like to see approach you?
So the name of our company, Big Idea Ventures, is, we called the company that because we want to find businesses which are global ideas, global products that have the potential to appeal to people in the US, in China, in Europe, in India, in South America, you name it. We want to support and back companies which create great tasting, good quality, consistent, wonderful foods in the plant-based and the cell-based space, and which have the ability to be appealing to everyone. We're not just looking for companies that are going to be popular in the United States or in Singapore or in China. We're looking for big ideas. So the biggest thing we're looking for, or the thing we're looking for most, are companies that have that potential. In terms of category, though, we do see a lot of companies coming through in the plant-based and cell-based meat side. We've got quite a few companies on the dairy side, but we're focused on meat, seafood, and dairy. The category that is kind of more of a white space right now is seafood.
Yeah.
There's only a few brands coming through on the plant-based and the cell-based seafood side. On the cell-based side, you've got Blue Nalu, for example, creating a cell-based seafood product. On the plant-based side, you've got New Wave, you've got Good Catch, you've got Ocean Hugger. You've got 3 or 4 kind of main brands coming up in that plant-based side of seafood. I would love to see more seafood. What we're doing to the oceans as a species is almost not something we can come back from unless we find a really good alternative. Now, I'm not suggesting that we all become kind of monks where we consume water and the plainest food possible. I want, just as much as everybody else, to be consuming the foods I grew up with, that I love, that I'm used to consuming. I just think there are ways through entrepreneurialism, through innovation, that we can provide those same foods that people love and adore, that's a part of their lives with their families. And I think we can produce them in more creative ways that has less of an impact on, climate, but also, for example, if we create a whole range of plant-based or cell-based seafood, we can have that same food we love without overfishing the oceans, which would be amazing.
Yeah. So thinking about those entrepreneurs, what advice would you give to them that they would like to hear from all your experience that you had working with so many startups and so much knowledge about the space?
Reach out to us.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality. The reality is we are building an ecosystem. Big Ideas is building an ecosystem with, for example, the Singaporean government, with Beulah in Switzerland, who manufacture big machines to help create these wonderful foods. We're working with Tyson Ventures and Tyson Foods on bringing great products to market. We're bringing different parts of the ecosystem together, from ingredients to manufacturing to distribution to retail to food service, so that when we find great startups and we find great foods, we can help those companies to get funding, we can help them to find the right partners, we can help them to launch those products in their domestic markets, and ideally, because we're building the value chains in other parts of the world, we can help them to launch those products in other markets as well. My ultimate goal is to be able to help a company to get its product into, United States, China, Singapore, Europe, because we've got all of the right partners in each of those marketplaces, and we want to help. So yeah, obviously, the advice is get started. Don't wait for somebody else to do it for you. If there's something you want that you don't currently find in the grocery store or in a store, and you can sit there and complain about it, or you can get out and build it yourself, and then work with folks like me to make that product generally available and ideally internationally available.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's fantastic, and I wish you all the best of luck. I'm hoping to see lots of great companies coming out with your backing, and yeah, thanks for coming on the show. So yeah, just to let you know, yeah, if you want to subscribe to the channel, please do, or comment. But for the meantime, thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you. Really appreciated your time today. And if people want to reach out to me, they can either reach out via LinkedIn, so Andrew Ive on LinkedIn, or via bigideaventures.com.
Great. I'll put your contact details in the descriptions as well.
Great. Thank you. Really enjoyed the conversation. I love what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks again. See you.
See you.
Bye.